Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this video. I haven't done a video in a while, and I'm going to stop saying that I'm going to be making these types or those types of videos because I really don't have any plans for any projects specifically right now. I just got a new phone, new camera on this phone, and I'm trying it out, testing it out. Um, and lately, well, I've been writing, I've still been thinking about stuff. I've been going through some things, as they would say, just some changes. Um, Mainly right now, well, I'm going to start focusing a little bit heavier, a little bit more on philosophical topics. I have basically three events coming up. I have an event this weekend where we're going to be discussing, I forgot the topic, but in 2 weeks, we're going to be discussing existentialism on the 29th. And then we're also going to be talking about, I think, stoicism or stoic philosophy. And then in 3 weeks, we're going to be having a different discussion topic, which by then will be in December. So I think one of those topics, either the first one in December and there's another one in December, but 2 weeks after that first one, we're going to be discussing topics on Christmas and the importance, if the spirit of Christmas is kept alive, or if it's all just a sham, or if it's all just fake, basically. I have a red dot staring at me right now in the camera, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, if we talk about anything, I guess we would be discussing free will. I'm still into that topic. So the notions of limited free will, which I've discussed earlier in other videos, and I've been doing a lot of writing lately because I had some neighbors upstairs, so they would make a lot of noise, and it was technically impossible for me to record, excuse me, without you hearing like a bunch of noise constantly, banging, just a bunch of weird noise. Um, so I think they're gone, or at least they're not here right now. So I'm able to record. Um, so I'm really excited about that because if that's gonna be kept like that, then I'm able to record a little bit more. And so I've been doing writing. I haven't really been making videos, but the stuff I've written about has been focusing a lot on, well, not a lot, but some of it has had to do with free will and the limiting aspect of free will. So I had a very interesting conversation on Friday night, which was about free will. And like sometimes I get like this, and I'm just like, well, then, what do you need to feel or to be free? Like let's go into hypotheticals. Like let's say God appeared, or the universe, or an all-powerful entity, whatever you want, right? Let's say you had a wish, or you had all the money in the world, or whatever. What would you need to feel free, or to be free, for you to say, I'm free? Then, well, first, I would say, in that case, I would need to know everything that there is to know, such as what happens after you die, or what happens, yeah, when you die, what happened before you were born, if there's heaven and hell, and if there is heaven and hell, what happens there? What, explore all of heaven, explore all of hell. Um, get to know God, also talk to God. Um, so that would be like the first thing, which these things, I guess, are a little bit metaphysical. They have to do with knowledge and abstract mental stuff. The second and third thing would be a little bit more practical. The second thing would have to do with being able to travel through time, back in time to the future, etc., to get to know everything. But in this case, I also add in a layer of metaphysical, or metaphysicality, into the notion of time travel, because I would be wanting to see what happened, at the beginning of time. If heaven exists, who created it? What created it? Or where is it heading? What's the history behind everything, right? And the time traveling thing, I'm gonna hold on to two ideas here. And the time traveling, well, that's the time traveling thing, which is the second one. And the space thing would have to do with basically getting to know all the whole universe, right? So every corner of the universe infinitely, and I say infinitely because if it's infinite, I would like to get to know it all. If it's not, then you know, what are the limits? You know, what's after that? Like whatever. So those three things, and then I add two more things which I heard about. So these other two things would be, in order for you to feel free or to be free, you would have to eliminate hunger, eliminate having to sleep, eliminate all of your human basic needs, even all of the Maslow needs, right? Such as social affection, connection, self actualization, all of these things from Maslow. Um, and the last one would have to do with you being able to have like all of the superpowers available, right? Such as being able to fly, being able to read people's minds, super strength, immortality, right? Then would you feel free? Then would you be able to say you were free? Right? So two thoughts I was holding on to. One of them was if someone gave you these powers, right? All of these five things, would you not then be conditioned? Would your freedom then not be conditioned by God, by the universe, by the wish, by the genie, by the wish maker, by the all powerful entity, right? Because then at any moment that thing or that person can just take it all away from you, right? And I was I gave the text to ChatGPT, which I wrote, and it said basically you can summarize those five things into two things. I think one of them has, and I have it right here. I can pull it up. One of them I know I remember has to do with causation. So I think I remember. It's basically knowing why things happen. Yeah, causation, knowing why things happen, where are they coming from, right? Where they are coming from, and being able to intervene or interfere in those affairs, right? Um, yeah. So that's basically that's a way to summarize all of those five things. Because if you think about it, well, you can say, yeah, the awareness of every cause shaping me, one, and the ability to intervene in those causes, two, right? Because if you think about it, and it says here, well, we know that we're determined by our basically by our unconscious biology, social influence, etc. But then if we're able to control the determinants, then traveling in time, exploring the universe, because and this is kind of interesting because then I thought about it and I was like, well, yeah, what would happen if God gave me all of the powers that I'm asking him for, or the universe or whatever, and all of a sudden I was like, well, hey, can I change the past? Can I do this differently? And God was like, no, what's done is already done. Or the future, right? Can I change the future? Things like that. And then if I had no power over that, then I would be limited again. And there's another interesting aspect to this, which is even if you were granted ultimate power, which would kind of make you like a demigod. ChatGPT said that. I thought it would kind of make you like a sort of god, but with a lowercase g. Um, I would still feel like you would be like there would be something hidden. I mean, it's like the master, right? Robert Greene talked about this in 48 Laws of Power, where a master taught his student all 365 techniques for combat or for battle. And the student thought he was all powerful and, he could defeat anybody, to the point, he got to the point where he even challenged his teacher, or his ex-teacher by then, I guess, to a battle, to a combat, right? Thinking he would beat him. And the teacher used the 366th technique on him to defeat him, you know and then I think when the emperor, the king, was like, why, how were you able to defeat him? He said, because I didn't teach him everything. I taught him almost everything, but I didn't teach him this last technique, right? So that I would think that would be kind of like God. Like God would say, "Yeah, here's everything," but I would be suspicious. I would be doubtful, you know. And then I thought to myself, is that the human condition to constantly question, to constantly be suspicious of things, to not really believe or trust in like absolutely in what people are saying, right? Especially nowadays, you see a lot of untrustworthy, not untrustworthy people, but you see a lot of people doubtful. You see a lot of people being sus, right? Being suspicious and not, kind of like, I don't really buy that, but okay, you know. So reservations, I call them, right? We all have reservations on things, which I think is maybe part of human nature. And then the other idea there is, okay, so if God was able to, which ChatGPT made this very interesting because he started talking about the God paradox, which I knew existed, but that wasn't my point with my text or with what I'm talking about. But the God paradox is like, can God make, I think there's a question that kind of introduces the topic, which is, can God create a stone that he can't pick up, right? Which which refers to the idea of the paradox of God's strength, right? If God is so powerful, can he then create a stone so heavy that not even he can pick up, right? If he can, then he should be able to pick it up because he's God. And if he can't pick it up, then he's not all powerful, right? And if he can create a stone like that, then he's not all powerful because only a powerful God could pick it up. So then, what's the solution there? Would it be then for him to be able to pick up a stone so heavy he can't even pick it up, but then be able to pick it up at the end of the day, right? So it's like a paradox. But what this refers to, and my question here for the text is God free? Like ChatGPT made some interesting points here, which I found them to be very provoking. One of them was, let me see if I can find it on here, but one of them was, can God stop being God? Right? Something like that. There's a couple here. The question of is God free is answered as both, again, hypotheticals. Yes, God is free because nothing causes God. God, he said, is a type of non-cause, which is the first cause. Excuse me. In this case, nothing or nobody created God, right? That's why it's a non-cause cause. So it's because nothing causes God. And second, freedom equals self-causation. So this refers to the idea that you don't, if you're able to give yourself freedom, right, by your own doing, by your own agency, then you're already free, right? That's what ChatGPT says. I don't know if that's true, or I don't know how I would reason it or understand that. Um, but it kind of makes sense because you could say, well, if I'm able to provide for myself, I'm able to get a job or grow a business or have a lot of money or whatever, then I can become free, right? But at the same time, do you have freedom to do other things, right? When you're limited, for example, by energy, which I think for me are is vital. In education, they say you need patience to teach, to deal with students, to deal with kids, to deal. And I say it's not really that's another text I wrote about. It's not really patience. There is an element of patience in there, but I feel like it's energy, and it's also this need to, or this, let me see if I can find it here because I did get into that a little bit. I just don't really remember it. Oh yeah, I called it the secret of teaching. Teaching is energy. Mm, yeah. Persistence. For me, it's persistence. So let's say I just remembered. Let's say nobody is paying attention to you or nobody is interested, and I'll get back to the God is not free hypotheticals in a moment. But let's say nobody's paying attention to you, right, in class, or the topic is not interesting, it's not, it's not fun, it's not dynamic, whatever. What do you need to do as a teacher? You need to persist. to persist, yes, you need both of those things. You need energy and you need patience. So you need to be able to also not say, ah, screw it, like students, right? You need to kind of be like, okay, guys, like, I see that you're tired, I see that you're distracted, I see that you're on your phones, I see that you don't care, but I'm going to persist anyway, right? I'm not going to mention it because I also feel like when teachers, kind of break the flow, right? They kind of break character, I would say. You're kind of like an actor, and you say, all of us, you stop the class all of a sudden and you say, okay, guys, put your phones down, put your phones away. Listen, I'm here, on my own accord teaching you, and you guys are being disrespectful. So what do you suggest we do? And then you open up Pandora's box, man. Don't ever do that. I mean, I never do that, and I've seen teachers do that, and they're not able to close that box back up. I mean, class for that, at least in that hour or that class, is ruined. Students are going to start debating, they're going to start they're going to start complaining about stuff, they're going to start suggesting how things and they're not going to change at the end of the day. Like, let's say they say, oh, teachers, just we think we need to have more videos, or like, I remember this, I think I've spoken on this, but this one time when um I would going green and whatever, green campaign, back in like 2017, 18, I would make students write in their notebooks, the exercises, the grammar exercises or whatever, and to save paper, to not print copies of the exercises, even though the school provided copies for free, as many as you wanted, which was really nice. But don't waste paper, whatever. So then I started making them write the exercises in their notebooks. After a couple of months, they started complaining, our hand hurts, we write too much, can we go back to printed paper copies? So I was like, sure. So then I started getting copies for them, right? Considering their suggestion, I made the change, adjusted, right? I was flexible. And then I started making copies for them, giving them printed copies. And after a couple months, they were complaining again. You're wasting too much paper, And then I said, well, what do you suggest? Do you suggest we go back to, notebooks, right? You guys copying, I'll project the exercises on a PowerPoint presentation like before, and you write down the exercises. No, they didn't want that either. So that's the thing. Like, if you open up Pandora's box, and I kind of think of it as a teacher, you're kind of like a leader. If you open up Pandora's box in that sense, you're not going to be able to close it. You're not going to be able to close it back again, because then they're just, they sense that you're able to take on suggestions, so they'll just keep piling up suggestions forever. It doesn't work. Never do that. I mean, I would admire a teacher that would be able to do that and then be able to bring back the class, right? Take control of the class. That would be nice. Um, but I don't think I can. I think I would just end up like screwing things up. So what I do is, that's the persistence angle, right? You need to ignore all that other, they're tired, it's the end of the semester, whatever, I don't know. They've had a rough week, other teachers, other classes, I don't know, they haven't eaten, they haven't gotten enough sleep, whatever the case may be. You need to persist, right? Like, we're going to be doing this, so let's do this. I mean, and I'm not saying here that you can't, pause the class, or maybe take a day off, or watch a movie, or maybe, go easier on students. You can do that, right? Especially if you're tired too. If, like, that's the general feeling, then yeah, I mean, like, you can just say, all right, guys, like, but don't make it explicit. Don't say, I see that you're all tired, so let's watch a movie. No, just, make it like part of the class. Like, okay, we're gonna do this, and as soon as we finish this exercise, we'll watch a movie, right? Because if you make it explicit, then again, it becomes like, oh, so we're able to manipulate the teacher, by, when he sees us like this, he'll like put on a movie or whatever, right? So yeah, don't do that. So anyway, or at least I don't do it. So anyway, persistence is the key. persistence means having energy, having a positive vibe, which means that you're, on top of your game. You're like, all right, guys, we're going to look at this. I even want to look at it, right? I see that we're going to be looking at interruptions. I want to see the phrases, the expressions to interrupt someone, right? I want to practice interruption. I want to see what this is about. I want to see the context in which interruption as a function is presented, right? So all of that stuff is very it's very important when you're trying to persist. Patience, yes. Energy, of course. But more than patience, I think, is that persistence, right? Because again, like, I think what fails is maybe when a teacher's like, I don't care either. I'm also tired, right? So I'm just gonna start, doing a bad job, and eventually, like, like, I think that's when students also stop. And you see, when that happens, students don't really say anything. They just also become like, they don't want you as a teacher anymore because you're not really teaching them anything. And I think the best classes are the ones where you feel you've taught them something, right? So yeah, I don't know how to connect all of this back to the idea of God. Freedom equals self causation. I was talking about how you provoke your own success, which is also another way of analyzing free will. Okay, but let's look at the hypothetical of no, God is not free, because this is the one that I was mentioning is thought provoking. God is not free because God cannot contradict his own nature. God cannot choose not to be God. God cannot commit evil in some traditions. God cannot unknow what he knows. God cannot become non eternal. God cannot cease existing. And God cannot act against logical truth, right? Um, this is a radical view. It says here on ChatGPT, God is omnipotent but not free in the human sense because God cannot do otherwise, which is interesting. I think I've written on this too. It's like, you're a human, you're limited by your human capacities. So if you're really free, can you not be human, right? Can you choose to not be human? Well, no, you can't. So you're limited by that, right? And of course, I'm talking about free will in its most radical sense, because I know, like, and I've talked about that too. You're free to a certain extent, when you can choose between right and wrong, which, if we add moral and ethics into free will, it becomes very interesting, and it's a never ending discussion, right? About what to do in certain situations under different circumstances in different contexts, etc. But ultimately, you don't really have that, free will, which I'm referring to as radical free will, right? Like, it's more of a limited free will in which you can choose between maybe going to bed at 9 or watching a movie and staying up later, or maybe watching half of the movie and then going to sleep. So that's the free will I'm talking about. And free will is a topic that I don't really want to like talk about anymore, because I feel like I've talked about it. But in 2 weeks, I'm going to be talking about it in that class on existentialism, because existentialism deals with freedom and responsibility, right? So that's actually why I'm so against the idea of radical free will or radical freedom, especially from Sartre, um, because I feel like you really aren't. And saying that you're free, I mean, I've been reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and beautiful. Like, he talks. I think I read that book only once, and I have it, but I'm reading it again for a class. And he talks about how you're able, and it's so true, right? Like, I have some ideas. Like, right now, I'm thinking of two that just stick with you, like, throughout your lifetime. Um, and this idea from Frankel is old. I mean, I've read it back in, like, probably like more than 10 years ago, or probably like 10 years ago. No, more than 10 years ago. But sometimes you forget things, and even though they're in your unconscious, this idea has been there, because I said it sticks with you like your whole life. Um, And the idea is very simple. The idea is you're able to go inside your own mind and really fantasize. I mean, like, this is talking about, and I have the two ideas. One of them is Rogers, the other one is Frankel. See, I do this lately where I have like, I was able to keep four different ideas. Well, two of them were kind of related, but four different ideas at this philosophical coffee talk discussion group that I go to, which is the one that I'm going to be going to in the next couple of weeks. Um, and what I do is like I'll with my fingers I'll make like a letter or letters. Like once I did an E and a P like on one where it was about education and politics or something like that. And the idea that I have related to that, I was able to keep four different ideas in my head without writing them down. And I've been practicing that. Like right now I have the fists, right? Like this is Rogers and this is Frankel. And I'll just do things like that, like this comes from the idea of, well, how to work your memory, because I got interested in that since I started, like not remembering certain things completely, especially ideas, especially new ideas. I mean, new ideas, you got to hold on to them because they come like, you know like quick, and they can also leave quick. So they're kind of like, I don't know, butterflies, flies, like I don't know how to make an analogy here with these types of ideas, but like sparks, like like let's say you create a spark and you want to create a fire, an explosion. You gotta feed that little spark, right? Because if you don't feed it, it dies out and it burns and it dies. And I said dies twice, but yeah. What I mean by dies is you forget, right? And I don't know why fresh, new, creative, spontaneous, inspiring, spark like ideas are the first, are so easy to forget, right? Like you remember things from years ago, right? That don't even matter, or from yesterday or today or whatever, that don't even matter. But you don't remember like those type of ideas, and I think it's because they come with so much force, so much potential, and I was forgetting those ideas. So I was like, I need to come up with a method, which at first was like the palace method, as they say. Imagine yourself walking into a palace, and I get a lot of this when, so I tend to write it down in my note in my phone or stuff like that, or write it down in on the computer or whatever. But I wasn't, what happens when you can't? What happens when you can't get out your phone, or what happens when you're talking to a person one on one, and it would be you can't say like, oh, give me a second, let me write this down. No, in those moments what I do is like I split my mind, right? Schizophrenic, no, but I divide it, and then one part of, like, I'm still listening to you, but another part of me is holding on and repeating that idea. And then eventually I start, like I said, I start doing things with my at first, it was like imagine yourself walking into your house and then associating the door with that idea, or associating the table with another idea, which kind of works. It's not bad, but I feel like you also, once you use that once, you can't really use it again because, or I don't know, maybe you can. But for me, what I've found works lately is, especially if I want to say something back, in order not to forget, train your memory, because I feel like we do live in times where, I don't know if it's because of the food, the chemicals, the air, the pollution, whatever, people forget stuff on the spot, right? Like it's like I was talking about this, and then it's like, oh, what was I saying? And then the other person wasn't even listening to you, so they don't even know what you were saying, so they don't remember what you were saying, so they can't remind you, etc. Things like that. So what I do is I use my fingers, right? And I tend to like spell out, kind of like gang signs, uh, like letters that start with the idea. And even then you can forget, but at least you have like what do they call it? That you have something to associate your idea to, right? Something tangible. Um, so yeah, that's how I started getting into memory. And in this case, the idea of Frankel, I'll talk about the Rogers idea, which I've spoken on before too. But anyway, the Frankel idea is that idea where you go inside your head and you imagine all of these hypotheticals or even things that you've experienced. Now, he talks about it from the Holocaust. He was in the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl, and survived the Holocaust. And this is a technique he used while he was in the Holocaust, where, you know, you would basically be like barefooted or, in the snow working all day, getting hit, whipped, being insulted by the guards, like suffering to the most extremes, right? A human can suffer in the Holocaust, in the concentration camps. And the prisoners there, he would mention that they would do that. They would go inside their own heads and imagine just, which he says at times would be dangerous, because some of them would imagine like being free and having like a nice dinner, and they would start imagining the food, with great detail and things like that, which I think he mentions is dangerous, but they would still do it. What he talks about doing is imagining his wife. He didn't know if his wife had died or not. He later found out that she had already died, in one of the concentration camps. But he would imagine her like talking to him. He would imagine and fantasize about talks with her, right? Where he would be like, and this reminds me of the what would Jesus do, right? So it's again imagining scenarios, hypothetical scenarios, the power of hypothetical scenarios. Um, I would say first of all, it distracts you from wherever you are, right? And this is an idea that can help you, when you're bored, or when you need to maybe be creative, think of new ideas. I mean, it takes work because and practice, but again, it's practicing, because this kind of associates with the idea of simulations and role plays, practicing for things which I've also touched on, which you need to eventually do, right? Like for example, having tough conversations with a friend, um, for that person to help you out in how it would go, more or less, when then you need to have that conversation with your boss, right? Or with someone on the hierarchy above, or that is, above you. um, so yeah, all of those things. I mean, I think education may be going in that direction of experimentation, right? Like I may be giving a course next year on assertive communication, and my intention for it is to be more of a workshop where we actually practice real life situations in that safe educational environment, right? Which I think, excuse me, school is basically there for, right? Mm, School to a certain extent is a simulation, is practice, it's role playing, it's even hypothetical scenarios, because that's where you develop reflective thinking, critical thinking, all of these creative thinking, in order for you to develop into like a working human being, right? Which is basically when you go out into the workforce. And then that's when you need to start doing, things that actually matter. Like once I was telling a student, like, it's the same thing. It's just that here, when you don't, here, when you aren't responsible, you just get a bad grade. But in real life, when you're not responsible, like at work, for example, you could get fired or you get money taken away from you, right? So it's like, yeah, like at first you deal with grades, again, quantities and numbers, and then you deal with money, right? Again, quantities and numbers, right? So it's like the same practice. You need to get up at a certain time, you need to go Monday to Friday to a certain place, be there for like what's a shift ultimately, from morning to afternoon, do certain things, turn in certain things, kind of like how you do when you work. So yeah, that's practice. And yeah, just to summarize the Frankel thing, I think that's, because a lot of this is tied in with Jodorowsky stuff, which is how to practice, which is what I'm going to be focusing on, which is kind of like theater, right? Like simulating things, imagining things. But the power of that is great because you can think about like just an exercise for this, and it kind of has to do with memory, which I have it written down in my phone, but I rarely do it. I used to do it a lot when I was younger, like when I was a kid and a teenager. But you can lay down in bed at night, or even during the day and imagine what you've done so far that day, what you did that day, what you did yesterday, like replay your day from the beginning to the end. And that talks about organization, right? You're basically practicing organizing and order, organization, self-management, management in general is what ultimately gives things direction and meaning, right? Without it, you're trapped in chaos, right? You're surrounded by blackness. So, in order to get out of that, like you need to start organizing things, being orderly. um, and you say, well, I may be wrong or this isn't everything. Doesn't matter. Like you're still giving meaning at least to the to some of the stuff, right, in your life, to parts of it, even if it's not the whole thing. I mean, trying expecting to organize your whole life or your whole existence, or everybody around you is like, what, I think that's impossible so far. um but anyway, so that's the idea of Frankel, and I'm gonna get into that like later on, like I guess when I'm giving the course, things like that. Okay, and the other idea is the Carl Rogers idea, which I just thought about right now because during this video I've been thinking that it's kind of weak or lame, or that I'm not, I didn't prepare anything, and honestly, like I'm just excited that I'm able to record. So I figured I'd just make a video just about whatever, spontaneous combustion, spontaneously, and uh, just talk about whatever's on my mind at the moment. Even though I have written, as I mentioned, stuff about different things, some texts, I've kind of gone back and forth between a couple things from the past. So it's not, I think the most impactful thing I've written so far is the God free will thing. I don't know. I can read this little riddle I wrote. Those who have me don't want me, and those who don't have me want me. What am I? I'll let you think about that for a moment. But yeah, I have other things here. Oh, I wrote extensively on the multiple intentions, meaning, and fascination. Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of stuff here that's moral and how it affects free will. All right, ready for the answer to the riddle? What am I? Fame. Okay. And yeah, so anyway, I don't really have an idea right now, like I said, for even an idea. I was going to say an idea for a project, but I want to experiment with this phone. So um, I thought about the Carl Rogers thing right now, which is basically how to be your authentic self, how to tap, which I've spoken on before, how to tap into that reality, into that direction into which you're going at the present moment, knowing where you are, knowing who you are, knowing what you are doing, right? Which is basically being authentic, being real, right? Like this is me, which ChatGPT also mentioned that's a way of being free, knowing who you are in essence, but then we get into the problem, into the trouble, we run into the problem of, do we have an essence? Do we have a spirit? Do we have a soul, etc.? But for the moment, we can say in practical terms, just look at who you are at the moment, look at where you are at the moment, look at what you're doing, where you're headed, use your intuition and just kind of lean into that, right? So if I'm like, I'm right here in front of a camera talking about free will, which I've spoken on before, what else am I going to talk about? You know, I don't know. I can just think about the fact that the Carl Rogers idea isn't even mine to begin with, right? So again, I'm conditioned by that, and it's like, see, the conditioning thing for me is a problem because it talks about the real lack of authenticity, originality, creativity, right? For me, something that gets copied, and maybe that's even an idea from the public domain. That's not my idea, and I'm also conditioned by it. But I can say I don't like it when things are copied, right? Why? Well, why not? Why is it bad for things to be copied? Well, let's just say let's go down that route. We can go down the other one later, I guess. But why don't I like it when things are copied? Well, it's fine. I mean, I can say you want to copy things, fine. You want to make them better, fine. You want to work on the shoulders of giants, fine, right? But then don't call yourself authentic. Don't call yourself original. Don't call that creativity because that's what troubles me, right? That's what doesn't make sense for me. How are you going to call something creative when there's a standardized way of doing it, right? When you know how it should be done and you're basically, it's like, okay, we're gonna, if I say we're going to paint your family, you're going to draw your family, well, you already know it's going to be done on a piece of paper, it's going to be done with color, right? It's going to be done with pencils or pens, or like there's already a way of doing things. So true creativity, true authenticity does exist, but again, it's kind of hard to really nail it down. That's why the importance of grabbing onto those to those moments of spark, right? Of inspiration, that all of a sudden there's like brightness, there's an idea, and you're like, oh, potential, right? That's potential right there. And I feel like that's why you need to remember those things, write them down, have a notepad or whatever to also to also follow through on those things. Um, but anyway, yeah, I guess that's all I got. Like I said, there aren't that many ideas. There are other ideas out there too, but they're kind of older. See, the thing with older ideas is, and by old I mean like last week, but the things that I'm kind of like a neophile. No, I think it's like you like the new things, but I'm not in terms of like technology or trends, but in terms of my ideas. So if it's like yesterday's idea or like last week's idea, I'm kind of like, I'm not really into that right now. That's why it's kind of hard for me to stay on a topic. And that's also why it's good for me to make these videos, because, or it functions to make, or it works for these videos because I'm able to talk about different things, right? Even though I may go back iteratively or repeatedly back to some things, but that's just, ascension of the spiral, which is going through things again, but at different levels, right? Um, to basically go deeper into them. But yeah, so I don't know. I forgot. I lost my. Oh yeah. So you need to remember things, and I lost my train of thought there in that last idea. Um, but yeah. So what helps is I'm remembering. What helps is doing those things in order for you to um, well, practicing is also important. And like I said, it helps me to make these videos and to be able to spontaneously talk about other things, right? So, oh yeah, I remember the idea. So what's kind of difficult for me is to work on something for a long time, right? Like if I say, like I remember I wanted to do, I still want to make a movie, right? But then like I get inspired to make a movie, and for me, I really want to just get it done like that same day. Like I feel like I should do that now, like at times. Like if I'm really inspired to do something, just spend the rest of that day, excuse me, on that project, even the whole night, like just until I get it done, because that's you being in the zone. That's that ZPD from Vygotsky. That's that I forget to eat and sleep because I'm so invested. I'm so drawn by this. I'm so inspired by this, right? But for me, it works on a short term basis, right? Like I can work on something long term, but I feel like that energy is not really there, right? That persistence, that motivation. I mean, I can have on days, off days, whatever, and I'll get it done. But I feel like what's in like really rich is like in the moment, right? Like short term, bang, like do it in that moment explosively, right? Like I mentioned, that spark, and use that spark in the moment. It's like when I write rap songs, like it has to be in the moment, and I need to record them in that moment because the feeling is in the moment. If I write it and then even if I record it to remember how it sounded, and then I practice for days and weeks, and then at the end of like 3 weeks, I finally record it, it doesn't have that same feeling, right? It's like make it that same day and record it that same day with the exact same, and it's not even about rhythm or maybe not even about tone. It's about like the feeling, right? Like the feeling is different. So I feel like I may work on that a little bit further down the line. And that's why I make these videos to a certain extent as well, because this is kind of like a therapy for me, and I listen to myself and I get ideas from myself as well. So thank you all for listening if you got to this point, and that's all I got for this video. So I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.